Morning, everyone. Welcome back to another year of Parsha and coffee. We will once again start recording the weekly Parsha class to be put up online. So everyone that's watching, welcome and good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. This week, we are learning the third Parsha of the Torah, the portion of Lech Lecha. You can find it in this Chumash on page 53. And the last two portions, the Torah talked about creation, the early origins of mankind, the earliest years of civilization of mankind. And in two portions, the Torah went through 2,000 years. The Torah covers basically 2,000 years of the first of the history, and the Torah doesn't say much about that time. It shares with us some information about Adam, and then he mentions that soon afterwards, how soon is probably a few hundred years, but a little bit, sometime in the first millennium, people began to drift away from the belief in God, and they started the practice of idol worship, and that caused a degeneration of society entirely, where people began to be immoral, and that eventually led to the second portion story, which is the flood, which we read about yesterday. Mm-hmm. God had said he had enough. He regretted creating man. He said all they do is bad, and he's going to destroy it. And the whole story with Noach, he told him to build an ark, and he came into the ark with all the animals, and he destroyed everything. And then Noach came out a year later and began to build a world anew, a better world. And that was in the year 1656 of creation, 1,656 years after creation. Noach, the end of yesterday's portion of Noach, we read of the 10 generations that came from Noach till Avraham. We read about Avraham's birth, and that's how yesterday's portion closes. Avraham is born, and he moves from to Haran with his father, and his nephews and his family. They move to Haran from Ur Kasdim, from where they were born, from where they were. And this week, the Parshas of Lech Lecha opens up with the words, Vayomer Hashem al Avram, Hashem said to Avram, go away from your land, from your birthplace and from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And he tells him, I will make you great, I will give you blessings, and it's wonderful. And Avram does that. And he moves to Israel, Canaan being the later Israel. And the story of the Torah is, this portion is a lengthy portion, there's a lot in it. A brief synopsis, he goes to Israel, and then there's a famine breaks out in the land of Israel, an economic crisis, he has to move. And he goes down to Egypt, and over there he was afraid that the beauty of his wife Sarah would be a challenge for both of them, because they would then abduct her, and who knows what they'll do to her. And in Egypt they were known for very promiscuous behavior, and he was worried. So he tells her that what we'll do is you'll say that you're my sister. This way they won't kill me, because, if I'm your husband and they want you, they'll kill me, they'll eliminate me. If I'm not your husband, then they won't kill me, at least, which is an interesting story in its own right, which needs a whole class on that alone. What was Avraham thinking here? In other words, you're putting your wife, you're going to say that she is we're not married, so they can take you and not kill me. Like, you're putting your wife in harm's way. Like, what is this? This is a very strange, at best, a strange kind of behavior. You wouldn't expect that from a man like Avraham. But So of course the commentators deal with that, and the Zohar deals with it and explains it on in its true manner what happened there, and which we won't get into today. But leave that as it. But that was the story, and she went there, and she was abducted. They brought her to Pharaoh, and over there she told Pharaoh that she's married, and God struck him and his household with a terrible disease, and he realized that this was because they took her. So they, of course, released her, and they told Avraham, Pharaoh had a complaint to Avraham, I come here and you tell me that she's your brother's sister. I think I thought she was available, and she's your wife. Why did you do that? Anyway, he then he rewards Avraham very much. He kind of like gives him gifts, and pray for me, and let this whole story be over. And it was. Eventually, they come back to Israel when things got better. And over there, they were all shepherds, and Avraham is traveling all this time with his nephew Lot. And Lot has his own shepherds, and they began to quarrel over the rights of grazing, and it became a whole story. So they separate. Avraham tells Lot, it's the best thing, you go one way, I'll go the other way. So Lot settles in a place near Sodom, famous Sodom and Amorah. And later we read about about a war that went, a world war that went on between kings, 4 kings against 5 kings, and in the process Lot was captured and kidnapped, and Avraham went to save him, and Avraham saved his nephew, put himself in harm's way. He went to war, literally with kings, all by himself with a few soldiers, and he got Lot out of there. And that was the end of that. Then we read towards the end of the Parsha, second half of the Parsha, we read about 2 major interesting events that take place with Avraham. Number 1, he had a communication with God. What we call the famous Bris Ben Habsarim, the famous covenant between the parts, where God makes a covenant with Avraham. He says, you're going to be my people. I'm giving you the land of Israel. It's yours and to your descendants. And he chose Avraham kind of like as the progenitor of the Jewish people, and he's now going to be blessed with all kinds of blessings. And that was the famous covenant, where God promises him the land of Israel. And then we read about the birth of Yisroel. Yisroel is born. Yisroel was the son of Hagar. What happened was, Sarah saw that she couldn't have children. She was a barren woman, so she said, maybe if he'll get married to another woman as well, and she'll have children. I'll raise them. It'll be better for everyone. And that's what she does, and she has a baby, this Hagar. And Avraham calls him Yisroel, and God tells him that you're going to have this boy, and he already prophesied then that he's going to be a wild person, and the world's going to have nothing but sorrows from him, which is so true. And at the very end of the parsha, we read about the mitzvah of the bris, of the circumcision. God tells Avraham when he's 99 years old that you should circumcise your son, yourself, and your household, and your Yisroel, and they all do it. Avraham at 99 years old, and Yisroel at 13 years old. And again, Hashem promises him, that's kind of like the physical manifestation of the covenant that Hashem made with him, that in the physical body, Hashem wanted to have a mark that the people that are Jewish, those that circumcise, are connected to Hashem. It's not just on some metaphysical or some spiritual or conceptual idea, but it's actually sealed in the flesh, and that from there comes the mitzvah of the bris, and with that, the portion closes. So there's a lot going on. So I want to talk about the first opening verse of this parsha today. in a little bit more an elaborate way. So let's go back to the historical perspective of it. In the end of last week's portion, we read that Avram's father, who's a man by the name of Terach, is 70 years old, and his wife gives birth to Avram, to Nocher, and to Haran. 3 brothers. He has 3 children. And it says there that Haran himself had a child, his name was Lot. So Lot is Avram's nephew, his brother's son. Then the Torah tells us that Haran died while Terach was still alive. In Ur Kasdim. What were the circumstances of Haran's death, of this brother of Avram? So we know that Avram, when he was 3 years old, Avram grew up in a household where everyone was idol worshippers. Everyone. And there was a king then by the name of Nimrod, who was a very, very strong leader, and he hated the concept of believing in God. They believed in idol worship, and that's it. Avraham, at 3 years old, began to wonder, what is this thing with idol worship? How could you say that a stone and a piece of wood is a god? It didn't make sense to him. At 3 years old, he was already wondering what about all these things. And the Medrash tells us that at 3 already he realized that there's got to be a supreme being in this world, a creator, the true God. And as time went on, he became more sophisticated in this belief. He thought about it more, and he developed it. And he began preaching it. He began teaching it. And he caused a lot of people to talk about a new concept, God, monotheism. And Nimrod didn't like it at all, and nor did his own father. And Terach the Medrash tells an interesting story that Terach he had a business. He would sell idols. That was his business. He had an idol shop. That's what he had. So Abraham broke the idols one day, and it was you ever heard the story? He broke the idols, and his father came home and asked him what happened to him. What happened was he was on vacation, I guess, Terach, and he asked his son Avraham to take over for him in the store, and he said no problem, and he used the opportunity to smash all the idols in the store. When his father came back, he asked him, what happened? He said, well, they all got into a fight, all the idols, and they broke each other's necks. So his father said, that's ridiculous, come on, He said, why is it ridiculous? He says, they can't move. He says, they can't move, but they can be a god. I mean, so you listen to your own words. He was that way he uncovered the fallacy of the whole thing to his own father. But he couldn't convince him. He did not convince him. Eventually, Terach went and informed against his own son to Nimrod. And Nimrod put Avraham to the ultimate test. He says, if you don't stop with your God, I'm going to kill you. And he actually made a furnace, a big fire, and he said, either you stop this or I'm throwing you into the furnace. Avraham said, do what you want. And he threw him into the fire. And a miracle happened. He didn't get burnt. His brother Haran was watching all this. Haran was influenced by both, by Avraham and by Terach. He couldn't make up his mind. He was like in the middle somewhere. So he said like this, if there's a true God, he wanted to believe in God. He was a good man, Haran. He was more convinced by Avraham than by Terach. But he said, at the end of the day, I don't know. So he said, I'm going to put this to the test. If Avraham survives this fire, then I know God exists. Avraham survived it. So he said, I'm believing in God. That's it. And Nimrod said, you're going into the fire too? He says, no problem. Because he saw that Avraham was saved. So he said, I'll go in too. And they put him into the fire. He wasn't saved. He died. Oh. He was burnt alive. Because he was wishy-washy. So Hashem didn't come to his aid. However, you shouldn't understand that Haran gets great credit for this. He gave up his life in belief in God. So it's not like this is a tremendous, heroic heroic. He did it with a little bit of a question mark. It wasn't a complete, he was kind of in the middle, but at the end of the day, if you saw a miracle happen with fire, would you be so willing to jump into that same fire? I'm not sure. He was. So you got to give him credit. That's what the verse means, that he died while his father was alive. And because of his father. His father's the one that informed against him. What this teaches you is that Avraham was a heroic figure as a young man. He was ready to give up his whole life for God. So he was a holy man already way back when. He was a tremendous hero and a devoted follower of God. And that was his history. At 75 years old, God comes to him and tells him the first verse of this portion. Let's read it now again. God said to Avraham, go away from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. So there's two questions that I want to address today. Number one, that will have the same answer. Number one, the Torah doesn't say anything about Avraham, who he was. There's not a mention of who is this Avraham? And why did God tell him all of a sudden to leave? What would be so terrible if the Torah would have told us a little bit about his great heroism and his great devotion to God before he tells us that God tells him to leave and become his agent on earth, the Jewish people. Tell us why. Give us the backdrop of who he was. He's such a great man. Why not tell us anything about him? We have to go look it up in the Medrash. Why does the Torah eliminate his whole first 75 years from the story? Not a word. And there's so much to say about him. When it came to Noach, the Torah tells us he was a tzaddik and he was a great man and you're the man that I want to choose to save. That's not that. If you go to yesterday's portion, the Torah doesn't begin, Vayomer Hashem al Noach, God said to Noach, you make a teva, I'm saving you. The Torah tells us why. He was a tzaddik. He was a righteous man. He was the Torah gives us the reason, gives us a little background about him to know why he's being chosen to be saved from the flood. Over here, when God is choosing Avraham to leave his birthplace, leave his father's house, leave his land, to start a whole, you'll be blessed and you'll be the man. Why? Who is this Avraham? And the Torah makes no mention of it. That's question number one, which we have to understand. Why did the Torah eliminate the reason why Avraham was being chosen? And it's not as if there's no reason. There's a very good reason. As I just got through saying, he was a tremendous, devoted, loyal servant of God to the point where he was even ready to go into fire for it. That would have been a great backdrop to the story, A few verses before, he's the man that went into fire for me. That's why God said, now I'm going to bless you and you be my man. I'm giving you Israel. I'm giving you all the blessings. Why not? That's question number one. Question number two, take a look at the verse. God said to Avraham, go away from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. We all know that the Torah is very economical when it comes to words. The Torah doesn't splurge on words. If the Torah could be concise, it's always concise. It doesn't like to use extra words. If I were the author of this book, and I want to say that God said to Avraham to go away to Israel, he could have said it in 4 or 5 words. Go away from your land and go to Israel. He says it's a triple expression. Go away from your land, me'artzecha, from your birthplace, from your mimeladitecha, and from your father's house, me'beis avicha. It sounds like a little, okay, I know you want me to go to Israel. Tell me, go to Israel. I'll go to Israel. Go away from your land, from your father's house, from your birthplace. What's the difference where I'm going away from? Just, you want me to go to Israel? I'll go to Israel. Say, Lech Lecha, go to the land that I will show you. Why this lengthy description of your father's house and your land and your birthplace? This sounds superfluous. There's no need to go into such a lengthy where you're going away from. It's not important where you're going away from. The important thing is you're going to there. You're going to Israel to become a new beginning, a new chapter in your life. So that's the second question. So let's elaborate on this. We'll go to the very next verse. Look at verse 2. When you get there, I will make you into a great nation. Which nation is this? Avraham knew which nation that Avraham is the progenitor of which nation?
Israel.
The Jewish people, yeah. So God is telling him over here now that he's becoming a Jew. God is now talking to him as a Jew. Which means like this. Until then, till he was 75 years, Avraham wasn't a Jew. He was just a good man. Like Noach. Was Noach a Jew? No. He was a good man. A great man, a righteous man. Noach is Adam. Was Adam a Jew? There were no Jews. He was a great man. He was a man that God made himself. He was formed by God himself. Over here, Avraham is being addressed as a Jew. I'm making you a new nation. You're now a Jew. Therefore, the Torah is specifically and intentionally eliminated his whole first 75 years from the story. And here's why. The Jewish people have a unique relationship with God. You see, up till then, and I want you to appreciate this, up till then, Avraham served God with the greatest passion, with every fiber of his existence. One can say he reached the highest level of divine worship a human being is capable of reaching. No one ever reached that level, maybe. On his own. He did this on his own. God never came to him. God never spoke to him. He was in search for God. He found God through tremendous sacrifice, with great sacrifice. As I mentioned, he gave up his life, ready to give up his life for it. And that wasn't the only incident where he showed his heroism. 75 years of this kind of preaching monotheism, of teaching monotheism, he converted so many people. By the time God tells him at 75 years to go to Israel, he influenced maybe half of the civilization of where he lived. When it says that he eventually came to Israel, when he left and came to Israel, it says that he came with all his converts. He came with a multitude of people. So he was a man that he had accomplished so much already. I mean, 75 years, a long time. But that's not mentioned in the Torah for this reason, because over here at 75, God is now starting a new relationship with Avraham that's not based on man's search of God. Any man can search God. Jew, non-Jew, everyone can search God. And many did. Noach searched God and found him. These people were great men. Mesushalach searched God and found him as a great tzaddik. Avraham was not the first. Maybe he was the greatest of them all, but he wasn't the first. There were others that found God. Chanoich, in the portion of Bereshis, we talk about, he went with God, he walked with God, God was with him, he was with God, he was devoted. There were people. But that was the human experience, the human being, reaching upwards to God and finding God. Now, here's the question. A human being, how much could a human being reach? How high can a human being reach? As much as a human being is capable of reaching. In this particular case, suddenly, in the beginning of Lech Lecha, this portion, this is no longer the relationship where the human being is in search of God, which is limited. Over here, it's beginning the other way around. Vayomer Hashem el Avraham. Now Hashem initiates and is in search of a man. Till now, man was in search of God. A man can search and find, but a man is limited, and therefore what he finds is going to be limited. in this case, the relationship is starting from above down, meaning from God to man. God is in search now of man. God says to Avraham, now I'm beginning with you a whole new beginning. What's the new beginning? I'm now interested in you. I'm now going to enter into a relationship with you on my terms. God is reaching down to man. Has God limited? No. What part of, when you say God reaches down to Avraham, is the essence of Hashem that reaches down to Avraham. There's no limits. So suddenly, as a Jew, Avraham is given the opportunity to enter into a relationship with God that is God-based, that is God-initiated, that is on God's terms, which is a whole different kind of relationship. It's an infinite type of relationship. Because the infinite God is initiating it. And that's a Jew. A Jew of course a Jew is in search of God, but a Jew comes from a different perspective, comes from a different angle. It's God that tapped the Jew on the shoulder and said, "Sir, I want you." And the Torah doesn't say why. You know why? Why doesn't the Torah say why? What was the question in the beginning? Why didn't the Torah tell us why Hashem chose Avraham? Because he was so great. That would have messed up the whole story. Because that would have been a continuation to his limited form of relationship with God. The Torah eliminates it. This is a whole different story. That's not the reason why I'm entering into a relationship with you. Or that's not what's emphasized over here. What's emphasized over here is this infinite opening that is now available to the Jew on God's terms. This is a relationship that God is determining. He's making the rules. He's setting the parameters. And when God sets the parameters, the sky is the limit. There is no limit. It's infinite. And that's the neshama. That's what we learned, that a neshama, he has a neshama. A neshama is a part of Hashem. We learned this in Tanya. Hashem is a part of Hashem. We're not human. We're not earthly human beings. This is not a man that's climbing a spiritual ladder and reaches higher and higher and higher and does it on his terms. This is God putting a piece of himself into Avraham and saying, you're now on my terms. You're not a human being anymore. You're a Jew. So your story is no longer the story of a regular human being. Your story is not the story of a godly human being. It's Vayemer Hashem el Avraham. It's Hashem now reaching down to Avraham and saying, you're now on my terms. So this is not a continuation of his first 75 years. That's a human being. This is God. This is a godly human being now. This is a whole different kind of thing. It's an infinite, it's a leap to a whole different kind of reality. So it really has no connection to the past. God said, oh, he's such a great man, that's why I'm going to let you be the man. It would have ruined the whole story. That would have turned the whole thing into the great human experience. We're going now into a greater human experience. That's not what this is about. This is about a godly experience, about man becoming godly. But Hashem giving him a neshama, revealing that neshama within him, and said, now you're a whole different kind of human being. You're a whole different kind of existence. You're no longer a regular human being. You're a Jew. A Jew is a mixture of God and of a neshama and a body. So yes, the body part is a human being, but that's not the story of Avraham. The story of Avraham is his neshama. That only God can give, and only God can initiate, and only God can make happen. And when that happens, the Jew enters he enters heaven. He has a whole new reality. It's a new reality for him. So that's why the Torah can't tell us about the past. Because this is about a departure from the past. This is about putting the past behind you and starting a whole new beginning with entering into heaven, to a whole heavenly experience that was never available to mankind before. Because God never made it available. So now when a Yid does a mitzvah, It's not a human being climbing a ladder called a spiritual reaching up to heaven. It's not that. It's God reaching down to man and saying, here, come up, come into my reality. So when a Yid does a mitzvah, this is not a man in search of God. This is God in search of man. He's telling one nation out of many, you're going to be my agents here on earth. This is no longer about man looking for God. This is about man representing God. And that's a different thing altogether. That's the Jewish story. And with this starts the Jewish story. And this also answers our first question, or our second question. Let's read this again. Vayemer Hashem al Avraham. Hashem says to Avraham, Lech Lecha, go away, or go for yourself, go to, me'artzecha, from where? From your land, u'mimeiladitecha, from your birthplace, u'mibeis avicha, from your father's house. El ha'oretz, to the land that I will show you. So it says in Kabbalah and in Chassidus that these three words, me'artzecha, u'mimeiladitecha, u'mibeis avicha, represents the three levels within the human being, which are the word aretz. Artzecha means your land, but it also means rotzein, has the same letters as ratzon. Eretz, milashon ratzon, from your will. God tells him you have to go away from what you want. Umimeiladitecha means your birthplace. So the Chassidus explains what's the birthplace over here. Every person is born with certain emotional attributes, certain natural instincts. Right? That which you're born with. From that which you were born with. So Hashem tells Avraham, you are to leave that which you were born with. I'll explain in a minute. U'mibeis avicha, and from your father's household, Mimeiladitecha means from the natural, emotional, your emotional nature, your natural emotions, that which you were born with, your nature. You go away from your nature. I'll explain that in a minute. U'mibeis avicha, from your father's household. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, avicha, mibeis avicha, from your father, is a reference to chochmah and bina. From your father and mother. Father, chochmah, learn in chapter 3, we'll learn that chochmah is the father and bina is the mother. We'll explain why. Because chochmah means the conception of an idea. Bina is the development of an idea. So the father is that which causes conception. The mother is that which develops that conception over 9 months, right? So that's why chochmah is considered father and bina is called mother. In other words, when we say go away from a beis avicha, from your father's household, which means the mother, your father, your parents, it means go away from your perceptions, from your chochmah and your bina. You've had a certain way of thinking till now, go away from that. Now let's analyze this a minute. Who's Hashem talking to? He's talking to Avraham. Tell me, Avraham's emotions were no good. Avraham's natural born nature was no good. It was perfect. His thought process, his perceptions, his beis avicha were not good. They were excellent. He only thought about God. Why do you have to go away from that? Why is Hashem telling him? And his will, he had a bad will. You tell me and go away from what you want. Okay, I don't want, not always do I want good things. But telling Avraham to go away from what he wants, from his will. Why should he go away from his will? His will is only about, he wants God. What's wrong with that will? Or what's wrong with his natural emotions? They're all great. It says that Avraham embodied, listen to this, it says that Avraham embodied the attribute of chesed, of kindness, from the world of Atzilus. The highest form of chesed. To the point that once Avraham was born and he came into the world and started He was living life here on earth. It says that the attribute of chesed, the supernal attribute of chesed, came before God and said, I have nothing to do with it anymore. Avraham is doing it for me. He took me over. He now is the manifestation of chesed. That's his emotion. His emotion is love of people, chesed, giving. Is there a problem with that? Is something you have to go away from? Why is Hashem telling Avraham, go away from your will, go away from your natural emotions, and go away from your perceptions? Does it make sense? But based on what I said till now, it makes perfect sense. By Avraham, his will was holy. His natural instincts were holy. His motions, meaning his natural emotions, were holy. And his natural thought processes, and his chokhmah and bina, his mother and father, meaning his perceptions and his thought process, were all holy. So here it's interesting that sometimes a human being by definition is limited. Is finite. We're finite human beings. So you may think that what part of us is finite? Our animal instinct, our animal side is finite. But our holy things are great, right? It's not true. Even there where we engage in holiness, it could also be on human terms. Human holiness. Let me give you an example. A person learns Torah. Like the Shulchan Aruch says, you should learn Torah, right? It says every Jew has to learn Torah. How much do you have to learn every day? A chapter in the morning and a chapter at night. So a person can say, I'm doing the right thing. I'm learning 15, 20 minutes in the morning, a chapter or an hour, and an hour at night. I'm great, 2 hours. What's wrong with that? So here you see that even in the realm of holiness, he's learning Torah, he's doing a mitzvah. Yet he's putting limits on that holiness. I'm going to go for 1 hour, not 2, not 3, not 4. Or charity. I gave my 10%. Or even, I gave 20%. It says you shouldn't give more than 20%. So again, holiness could also be a limitation. Limited, right? It could be also within a framework. Till here and not further. When Avraham was a young man, up to 75, he was a holy man. He was tremendous. He was just a tzaddik of enormous proportion. Mesirus nefesh, self-sacrifice, everything. But as I said, it came from within his own. It came from within his own search for God. So all his holiness was born out of a man's search for God. He wanted to be holy. He was looking for God. His perceptions, his emotions, his will, it was all man-made. Man originated. Man is limited. God is telling Avraham, my friend, you're no longer man. From today and on, from your 71st birth, 50 birth, 75 and on, Vayemer Hashem el Avraham. Hashem now is reaching down to Avraham. You're now on my terms. Leave your past wills, leave your past emotions, leave your past perceptions. It's all man-initiated. It's all limited. You're going into a whole new realm now. Now what you want is going to be on my terms. Now what you feel will be godly. Now what you will think and perceive will be godly. Now you're going to learn Torah. Torah is my wisdom. Infinite. It's a whole different relationship. Go away from even the holy limitations. That's what God's telling him over here. You have to depart from any kind of limitation you put on yourself, even holy ones. Because, and by definition, Avraham is limited. Because he's a human being. Every human being is limited. There is no such a thing as a human being that can reach out of his own limits. It's not possible. And that's what Hashem is conveying to Avraham over here. Till now, your will, your love, everything was great. It was holy, but it was yours. It was limited. That's not who you are from now on. From now on, it's all infinite godliness for you. It's a neshama. A neshama has infinite emotions. A neshama has infinite will for God. A neshama has infinite perceptions for God. It's not limited to the human experience. It's a neshama. And when it's a neshama, it's a Jew. So today starts, but Lech Lecha starts the story of a Jew, not the story of a great human tzaddik. The human tzaddik was till 75, and the Torah makes certain not to mention it, not to confuse what was starting at 75. And that's why he told him, that's why the lengthy discussion here. You could have just told him, leave Ur Kasdim and go to Israel. It's not about leaving Ur Kasdim. It's about leaving who you are. It's leaving your humanism, your human reality, and entering into El Ha'oretz Asher Areka, to the land that I will show you. This is Eretz Yisroel, this is Neshama, this is a whole different thing. This is on Hashem's terms. So the Torah says, what you were till 75 was great, but it was a human greatness. We're not mentioning it, because that's not the story of the Jewish people. By Noach it does say, you're being saved because you were a tzaddik. Because Noach didn't go into a relationship with God like Avraham did. Noach was a continuation of his past. He was a great tzaddik, so God saved him. Great. Over here, Avraham gets the blessings not because he was a great tzaddik. That's not what happened over here. Because if that was the case, he would have been rewarded commensurate with his tzidkus, with his righteousness. This is a whole different thing. That's why Hashem tells him, go away from your will, go away from your birthplace, your natural self, and go away from even your perceptions. Your father and mother, which is Chochmah and Bina, go away from all of that. That's not who you are anymore. Even though they were holy. But holiness could also be limited. When someone says, I'm going to give 20% to tzedakah, but not 21%, that's limitations. Someone says, I'm going to learn 2 hours a day, but not 2.5 because I already did my quota. That's limitations. It's holy limitations, but it's limitations. That's not the relationship of a Jew with God. A Jew and a God now are on Hashem's terms, which is infinite. There's no limits. With 2 hours, go whatever you can. There's no limits. So that's why we have this lengthy pasuk in the beginning, all this, what seems superfluous when you read it at first glance, and the main question, why all that was eliminated. With this we conclude, we'll go daven Moshe. And we'll see you next week for Parshas Vayera.